Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the KidsMatter webinar tonight, looking at some of the most recent developments in KidsMatter, resources to support the social and emotional wellbeing of Aboriginal children. We've been very pleased tonight to have so much interest from lots of people from around Australia, and people are joining in and have been having some conversations already. So we've been watching some of that happening as we've been sitting here getting ready. So thank you very much for your interest, and we're looking forward to a really an important hour, I guess, in terms of finding out a little bit more about the resources and really having some good conversations around how important understandings are in relation to social and emotional wellbeing of Aboriginal children. I'm joined by a panel tonight, which is also fabulous, and the wealth of knowledge, I think, amongst the panel and what we're going to be sharing and the resources, I'm thinking people are going to find really helpful and really add to your practice, whether you're a teacher, whether you're an early childhood professional, a community member, mental health professional. A whole range of people are joining us tonight. So we're hoping that there'll be something for everyone and everybody will go away with something. Before we go any further, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of lands and waters throughout Australia, and of course we are joining each other from lots of different places around Australia tonight. I'd like to pay respect to elders both past and present, and recognise the importance of continued connection to culture, country and community, to the health and social and emotional wellbeing of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children. And of course tonight is really about bringing that to life. This is what we're here for tonight. This is what these resources are about. So I think it's a really important message in terms of what it is that we're doing together. So the webinar, tonight's panel, as you can see there, Carmen is an Indigenous psychologist who is a clinical psychologist and provided expert advice in the first phase of KidsMatter Aboriginal Animations project that we're talking about tonight. And she's commenced a PhD at Charles Darwin University. So welcome, Carmen. You're the one that's from Darwin. The rest of us on the panel are in Melbourne tonight, so thank you for joining us. What are the things you like most about KidsMatter from the work that you've done so far?
Well, I've been with the program for a number of years, and the thing that I like most is actually the process of the research. So there's been lots and lots of consultation with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. There's been lots of involvement, and every time feedback has been given, it's been received and incorporated into the next draft. So there's been a lot of respect of knowledge and protection of knowledge, and the way that it's just organically involved into the next step, and the next step has really been done in constant consultation with the communities, and that's my favourite part of KidsMatter.
Yes, thank you. It's been an important part of the process, and thank you for your part in it. I'd like to next introduce Rachel, and Rachel is an early childhood educator, and she's been teaching kindergarten for 20 years and is currently an educational leader and a KidsMatter leader at her centre, which is a centre in Melbourne. Rachel, what's the best thing about KidsMatter at your kindergarten? What are some of the things that you've done, and what do you like the best?
Well, we've been involved in KidsMatter for 2 years now at our centre, and what we probably find the best is recognising the community, the value of community in our centre. We've also found that KidsMatter have been a really useful tool for us to reflect on our teaching practices and reflect on our knowledge.
Yeah, so the process has been really important in having conversations and talking about it.
Definitely.
Yeah, thank you. And Jade has worked in the early childhood sector for 15 years as an educator, children's services director, parenting support facilitator and early childhood education consultant. And throughout her career, Jade has advocated for children's cultural and linguistic rights and the importance of valuing Aboriginal cultures and perspectives in all Australian early childhood services. And Jade, we were having a chat a little while ago about why that's so important, so that the identity and the importance of the work that you've been doing. Would you like to just share a little bit about that?
Lynn, I'd say valuing children's cultural and linguistic rights is the basis of any early childhood or quality early childhood program in the first place. It's pretty simple. Without knowing that you're valued and respected, it's pretty hard to learn. So before we get into all the learning outcomes we expect of children, we need to make sure their families and the children themselves feel valued for their identity and who they are.
Right, thank you. Yep, really important. So already I think we can see the diversity in the panel. A little bit about myself. I'm a community psychologist based in Melbourne, and I worked with the KidsMatter initiative for 4 years. So it was one of the, I guess, most enjoyable periods of my time. And this Aboriginal resource development was sort of the last project that I worked on. And I guess in terms of the learning and the process and the time to really be able to think about how to do this work and how to do it in a way that is respectful, that is learning for us, and ends up with resources that we're going to be talking about and looking at tonight. It was a very special project for me and a real opportunity personally and professionally to grow and develop. So that's what we're going to be drawing on this evening. Many people have probably participated in webinars before, but just, I guess, a reminder about the webinar. I'm sure you've all found the chat. I can see people are introducing themselves, which is fabulous, and we really want you to engage with that during the session. And we've got people here behind the scenes at the Australian Psychological Society tonight who'll be doing some moderating, some monitoring of that, and just sort of alerting us to questions that might come through that we might want to answer. We've had lots and lots, hundreds of questions, so we're not going to get to answer every question we've had, but there are certainly themes and topics that we'll be looking at and hoping to cover in the time that we do have together. When you are participating in that chat, everybody can see your comments, so just being mindful of that and just the professional setting that we're in as well, that in many ways it's like a face-to-face activity. We just can't see everybody in the space. So use that. If you're having trouble with technical issues, use the technical help button, which I think people are using as well, and you'll get lots of support with that. So we're well supported by people from MHPN who are here with us and Redback as well. So there's a lot of support with technology, so ask for the help if you need it. If you'd like to hide the chat, it says click the small down arrow at the top of the chat box if you're finding that that's a bit distracting. And at the end of the session, we will have a short exit survey, which we'd really appreciate you to complete. Your feedback is really important to help us to continue this work and to engage in the participation of you in that way. We will be looking at one of the animations this evening, and I guess when we are looking at animations that are based on stories about Aboriginal people or stories of people's lives, it is important to be thinking about ourselves and thinking about the way that these videos or the messages in there might be impacting on us. The videos, the animations were developed in extreme collaboration with Aboriginal people, so something Carmen's already touched on. But we did consult right from the start of the project with Aboriginal people in relation to the content that should be in there, right from the conversation around what is wellbeing, what does that mean for Aboriginal children and families. And I guess in that process of working with some consultants, we were never going to be able to capture all experiences of Aboriginal people, and we're never going to say that they're representative of all people, just as any images or videos are representative of any particular group of people. So we're very mindful of that, and they are conversation starters. So just to be mindful of that as well. So watch out for the messages, watch out for the strong themes that are coming through, and some of those are positive themes. Some of the emotions that you might feel, though, might range from positive to a little bit more challenging, and there might be characters and scenes that you can identify in quite different ways, depending on your own experiences. So just be mindful of that and what you might need to do to look after yourself and who might help you with that. Learning outcomes, just very quickly, we're wanting to really talk about that process behind the resources, how they started, what happened along the way, and we're already starting to do that tonight. But really thinking about how they can be used. So these are powerful resources, we think, and the feedback we're getting would confirm that. We know that they might be used in schools, early childhood services, community settings. They're available on the website for anybody to use. But we're really wanting to make sure that people get the most out of them, but also that people use them safely so that they can really get the most out of them and be safe in their use. We're also wanting to really increase understandings of the factors influencing Aboriginal social and emotional wellbeing. That's really the essence of the project, where it began, which was really when it was recognised that the KidsMatter resources didn't really speak to people from Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander backgrounds. So there was a recognition that we needed to do something some work that was going to make that better. So that was something that we really wanted to enhance, and that was an important part of the work. So I think we need to look at one of the videos. Hopefully you've looked at the videos already, but if not, we're going to show one now. And this is something that I think hopefully you'll get to see all of the videos. There are 12 videos in all. This is one of them called Nana's Painting.
This is my Nana. She loves to paint. My Nana paints her country. She says, even though she hasn't been back to her country for a long time, when she paints it, she remembers. Nana remembers being a little girl and living with her family on their country. She says it was a peaceful life and that there was not much humbug in those days. Everyone was happy and healthy on their country. They lived off the land. They didn't need takeaway then. They already had everything they needed. Then one day, they weren't allowed to visit their country anymore. Nana reckons it was sad. That's why she paints her country so she can visit it again. Nana thinks about her country all the time. My Nana is a good singer too. She sings for her country. Sometimes Nana lets me help her paint. We paint the water holes and the sand dunes and even a cheeky dingo. Nana likes to teach me about her country. She says it's important that I know where I come from. Nana might be old, but she's still fast. Nana always saves the leg for me. People love my Nana's paintings. Even though she's travelled the world, Nana still keeps painting her own country. It's her job, she reckons. One day, I'd like to take Nana back to her country, back to where she lived when she was a little girl with her family. This is my Nana. She loves to paint.
Okay, so I'm hoping everybody got to hear and see the video. You can see some comments coming through about people enjoying it and finding it awesome is one of the comments. So I think it's time that we do a bit of unpacking, I guess, of that video and some of the thoughts and some of the learning that might come from that. And as we're using the comment box, if you've got some comments or thoughts that come to mind, please share those. We're going to begin with Carmen, and Carmen's really going to talk to us about social emotional wellbeing of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children. Thanks, Carmen.
Thanks, Lynn. I really enjoyed this animation and bit of an honour to comment on it. I connect with it quite a lot because I spent a lot of time with my Nana as I was young, as many little Aboriginal kids do. Nana's painting is a nice way of depicting the many layers of what identity means to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. It's an insight into not only how identity is formed, but how it's kept healthy and transferred to the next generation. Good examples are when grandmother keeps her granddaughter close while she's painting, while she's hunting, while she's going about her day. And, in Aboriginal families, there is no separation of children's routines and adults' routines. It's everybody doing things together, and it's a way of building good attachment. And this connection to each other, to land, to spirituality really defines what Aboriginal identity is, and this is depicted nicely in the animation. An important thing to note here is that it's a peek at how life was before colonisation. I think that animation nicely shows the peacefulness of family life. There were, in fact, many clashes between groups at that time. We can be a little bit territorial, but there was a balance of life, and generously, it was harmonious in general. I think it was important to acknowledge that the animations gently introduced the notion of the impact of what had happened to grandmother, and that she used painting as a way of healing and reconnecting with the past, but also transferring knowledge onto her granddaughter. By letting her paint with her and singing her country to her, taking her hunting, is directly transferring the culture onto her, and is a sign of the resilience of both grandmother and building resilience in granddaughter. It does this in such a gentle way, and is welcoming for reflection to anybody who views it. I guess the thing that is a nice theme throughout the animation is the message of connection to land, connection to culture, connection to spirituality, and connection to each other's. And this is shown quite nicely in doing things with each other. One of the things to think about when you're trying to view social emotional well-being for Aboriginal children is recognising that this child is embedded within such a complex and intricate family and extended family, community and society. So there's a lot of social determinants of health to be considered. The footprints in time research really had some great outcomes in that they found that parents have concern for the person as a child and a future adult, concerned that they are thriving in the face of adversity rather than avoiding negative life events, that it incorporates a wide range of individual and environmental dimensions and includes, their autonomy but also functioning as part of a larger social group. What happens is that when children grow up and take on these values and internalise them in their own definition of social emotional well-being, it really is dependent on the quality of the early childhood. It wasn't so great, and there was a lot of negative factors such as low birth weight, poverty, antenatal care not being so great, and some other family factors like stolen generation issues, child removal issues, social disadvantage, economic disadvantage, violence or substance abuse. It doesn't set them up well for building a strong identity, a strong relationship with culture, and thus resilience in the end. But I guess what these animations are trying to show is that there's many positive protective factors that can be enhanced right now through connections with community centres and centres that might use this animation as part of, say, the reconciliation program or social emotional framework such as KidsMatter. So in order to use these animations, it can be both an individual thing and it can be a group training exercise. I'd like the individual to get out of it some reflection about what Aboriginal identity means and how they can learn more about the First Peoples of Australia and where they sit in relation to their newfound knowledge. As a training activity, it's good for groups to really discuss the issues and to note other people's perceptions and perhaps some stereotypes and break them down and really be on the same page when they're trying to connect with community.
Great, thanks, Carmen. I think you've done a lovely job of bringing out the messages from Nana's painting and then moving out into more about social, emotional and wellbeing for Aboriginal children, some of the factors that sit behind that. And it reminded me, as you were talking, it reminded me of the conversations we had with our Aboriginal consultants right from the start of developing the videos. And the messages, and how do we get the messages? How do we make it meaningful, rich, and not shy away from problems and difficulties and challenges that people have, but not to have that at the front and centre. So finding ways to manage that, highlight resilience, the strengths base as well. And I think you did a really nice job of recognising those things. So thank you.
Thank you.
I just want to maybe just think about for a moment, sort of step away from Nana's painting for a few minutes and really look at more broadly some of the ways that these might be used in school and perhaps in communities as well. And also go back to where the idea about why these are important. And I think Carmen's touched on it. We've already sort of touched on a little bit just through our initial conversations as well. But I wanted to include this quote, which is really talking about the importance of culture in Aboriginal wellbeing and identity, which is the theme coming through already. But that sense of pride in heritage being a central theme in understandings. And again, this notion of how we think about mental health, how we think about social emotional well-being, and what language we use, and how we draw on our own experiences as well. And I could see in the comments that some people were really talking about what it was meaning for them and reminders for them. So there's a universal aspect to some of these messages as well, but at the same time, we don't want to lose some of the important messages around what's specific and what's unique to Aboriginal people's experiences. This quote comes from a literature review that was done 2011 now, a few years ago, for KidsMatter. So it's available on the website, or hopefully it's on the documents. You'll see at the bottom right-hand corner of the page there. There's documents. So keep an eye on those for the resources that are available, or on the website you'll be able to find that literature review, which is really handy. So I thought it was good just to start with that quote. And instead of sort of saying this is what you should do in schools, I wanted just to propose a few questions, I guess, or some things just to think about, because I know that everybody's school situation will be quite different. And I also wanted to draw upon the KidsMatter framework. And if people are familiar with KidsMatter, you'll know what I'm talking about. If you're not familiar with KidsMatter, it might be good to go and have a look, but hopefully I can give you a bit of an idea about the sorts of things that KidsMatter includes. So when you begin the KidsMatter journey, you really start to look at what you know about your community. Who's in your community? Who are the people? Who's having a voice in the school, or this applies to early childhood as well. What are the sorts of things that we're doing already, and who's participating and who's not? So if you're thinking about introducing resources into that framework that are looking at Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander community members, you might then think about who are the people that can work with us on this, who are the people that are in our community that we know already and have relationships with, and what's that relationship like, and how could we use these resources to build that relationship. So not even thinking about using them with families or staff, but thinking about how can we actually build the relationships and having conversations about the use of the resources that might help us with that. And then thinking about what is it that we're looking for that increase understanding. So what are the current understandings about children and family strengths and needs in our community? And that notion of relationship is a really strong message throughout all of the KidsMatter implementation and resources. When we're talking about schools and people in the audience today, you might come from a school where there's a lot of Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander community members, or you might come from a school where there's small numbers or not very many at all. So that's going to impact on how you might want to be able to use these resources. So it's important to be thinking about that, thinking about how you might do it in a way that's going to respect the knowledge and the relationships that are there, how you're going to build relationships, not use them in a way that's going to narrow down the thinking. So that notion of working together is a really important one, and being part of the plan that you have overall. So building it into the framework rather than seeing them in isolation, although of course they're available and people can use them and look at them. But really, if you're wanting to use the KidsMatter model, that would be the sorts of things to be thinking about. All right, we'll return to Nana's painting again, because I'm sure there's still more that we can be unpacking and thinking about. So I'd like to turn to Rachel now and return to Nana's painting and really think about this very much from an early childhood educator perspective. So thanks, Rachel.
Thanks, Lynn. Look, I love Nana's painting. It's one of my favourite out of the animations. And I believe the animation, Nana's painting, should be used as a professional learning tool for educators. I think it would be quite useful for educators to get together and use that as a tool. I also think that using it as a learning tool will strengthen how educators support Indigenous children's social and emotional wellbeing. I think it's really important that educators sit together and watch Nana's painting together as a group. And I think it's important then that they then take some observations while they're watching. And one of the observations they should be looking at is the emotions that are shown in the animation. The emotions on the faces of Nana and of the child, but also listening to the music. The music tells you a lot about how they're feeling. I'm thinking about when was Nana sad and when was she happy, what made her sad and happy, looking at the child and how the child felt as well. I also think it's important, to take a transcript of the video as well. Actually look at the words that are used in the video and relate that to the emotions and the feelings in the video. Another important thing to observe is the relationship between Nana and the child. Nana shares a lot with her grandchild. She shares her storytelling, she shares her music, she shares her tucker, she shares her painting and her arts. And looking also at how the child feels about Nana, you can see that the child is right up nice and close to Nana and really enjoying that relationship that she has with Nana. It's also important to observe the Indigenous culture that's shown in the video, which I think Carmen touched on a bit of that as well. It makes you think about what you already know about Indigenous culture and what you might learn from the video, what you don't know already. Looking at that respect for elders, the connection that Indigenous people have with their community, with their family and their country, and looking at the storytelling and the arts and the music and the sharing of that as well. Then once you've had a good look together as educators and you've discussed your observations, I think it's really important to reflect on what you've observed and reflect on your knowledge that you have about the Indigenous culture as educators. So looking at the history, looking at their traditions such as the storytelling and the arts and the music, looking at the connection with the country, and most importantly looking at the child rearing practices, because that'll assist you in how you work with your Indigenous families that are at your centre. Really important with the child rearing practices that you really acknowledge that the role of the elders and the role of the extended family and the community as well. I think it's also important to reflect on what relationships do we as educators have with our families. Are those relationships collaborative? Are they meaningful? Making sure that there's respect in the relationship that you have with your families. And making sure that they do include the extended family, not just, mum who brings the child and the child. It's the whole family. It's also important to reflect on what our knowledge of each child, how does that knowledge that we have about the child reflect in how we teach the child? So most important with an Indigenous child, what knowledge do we have about this child that will help us to better teach this child in our centre? What ways does how does the child learn? What's the difference between how, one child learns and another child learns? How does an Indigenous child learn? Need to reflect on that knowledge together. Particularly important looking at Nana's painting, looking at the storytelling and the music and the spending time with adults and your elders that are important in a child's learning journey. Looking at the social and emotional wellbeing, from our reflections and from our knowledge, how do we support Indigenous children's social and emotional wellbeing? I think it's really important as a group that you're having a conversation about that. You've looked at your knowledge from your observations, you've looked at your reflections and your discussions, and then how do we support Indigenous children's social and emotional wellbeing from this knowledge? Looking at our teaching practices as well, reflect on our teaching practices. the way we teach, does that benefit children from an Indigenous background? The next steps for educators would be to look at their strengths. So have a good look at what we already do as a centre, and as educators, what do we do already? What is it that we do well, and what is it that we should perhaps do differently? What can we do differently that would make a difference from the knowledge that we've learnt from our reflections? I think it's also important to use the many different resources that you have on hand, and that the KidsMatter website is probably one of the best resources that we have. And I think it's really important that you keep updated with that website, because there will be some new text-based resources that will be released soon. It's really important that you're up to date with those resources, particularly when using the animations in early childhood. Thanks.
Great. Thanks very much, Rachel. There was so much that you covered in that short time, so thank you very much for that. I'm really enjoying hearing what you drew out from Nana's painting, the things that you talked about, and the music and the arts, and the grandparent, the role of grandparents in children's lives. And I was also enjoying watching some of the comments coming through from the general chat as well, and people talking about different things that it prompted them about. So things about relationships and really affirming of things that Rachel was saying. But also talking about some of the relationships and ways that we might want to improve the relationships between school teaching staff, early education staff and children, and how these videos might be useful for that. So that professional learning aspect and how we might use the videos for that came through very strongly, I think. So thank you for that. And Jade, I'd like to now move on to you and another early childhood perspective, but for a slightly different one. So from a consultant point of view, picking up on, again, some of the themes from Nana's painting, but also probably a bit more bigger picture as well in terms of some of the frameworks and things that are important. Thanks.
No worries, Lynn. Look, I've been asked to speak today about Nana's painting in regards to services that don't have Aboriginal children or that they're not aware of. Or who may not feel like they're connected to the Aboriginal community around them. And the first thing I wanted to talk about was in relation to the early years learning framework. This is a quote from them that I've got up there at the moment, and obviously you can read that about being, belong and becoming, not being new concepts to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. I think it's really important that we need to shift our view from looking at teaching ideas or learning about Aboriginality as a subject to learn about, to rather looking at Aboriginal perspectives and knowledge as practice we can learn from. Non-Aboriginal educators and people in general are relatively new to the concepts of things that are in the EYLF, and whereas with Aboriginal people, obviously, they've used these concepts for millennia, so we have a lot to learn there. The story of Nana's painting itself, it epitomises all of the outcomes of the learning years, of the early years learning framework. So all 5 of them, you can clearly see in Nana's painting that this little girl has a strong sense of identity and wellbeing. You can see that she's connected and contributes to her world. You can see she's a confident and involved learner, and of course a very effective communicator. So I could go on, but we've got a very short amount of time, but if you were just to flip through the EYLF, for example, and look at the evidence principles, there's lots and lots of evidence principles in there that relate very specifically to this film. So it talks to us a lot about identity in general, and that's something we can look at as educators. As I said, I was asked to speak about this in relation to the resource in relation to non-Aboriginal services who may not have Aboriginal children. I've just realised, sorry, they've put my slides out of order. There we go. And the why you might want to use this resource. And one of the main reasons is that as early childhood educators, we've got a significant impact on the perspectives of future of Australians. And in actively promoting understanding of Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander ways of being and knowing, we are supporting the social and emotional wellbeing of Indigenous children now, but even more so in the future. It's the children that we're teaching today that are going to be the decision makers of tomorrow, and we need to start now to make sure those decisions are based in truth and respect. So that's why we have Australia's Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander cultures are valued as part of our National Law Act. In the past, it may have been a case of early childhood educators may have wanted to include Indigenous perspectives because it was their own value, their own personal value, but it's important to note that now that's become an expectation of the framework and anybody who works in early childhood, that all early childhood services actively demonstrate this respect and value. So it's something everybody is expected to do now if they're in the world of early childhood education. Another point is about how it says there, the Melbourne Declaration of Educational Goals for Young Children, that was actually released before the frameworks, and it's one of the documents that went towards the founding principles of the EYLF. And as you can see, it says that all young Australians become active and informed citizens. And I think it's worthwhile thinking about what informed really is. We get a lot of people saying, you know, I wasn't taught at school about the truth of Australia's history, and I think that's something that can change now, and that we have that within our hands as early childhood educators to make a difference to that change. And knowing that being an informed citizen actually means knowing that you're living on the land of the oldest continuous living culture in the world today, and being wanting to celebrate that. I've highlighted the NQS 6.3.4 there for educators, which is about the service building relationships and engaging with local community. As far as something that a service is assessed and rated against, it is pertinent to think about the fact that every single service in Australia has an Aboriginal history and an Aboriginal present story also. And you need to think about who that local community is and how you're engaging with them, and what do you know about them, and, you know, where are you thinking about the land you're actually on. Just move on, see if I can get back around to the right order. So just speaking to the practical side of things, so what if there are no Aboriginal children at my service, and what can I do? I think it's important to acknowledge the fact that you may well have Aboriginal children in your service or Aboriginal staff. People may or may not identify as they choose, so I wouldn't just have that as a blanket, I don't, you know, there's nobody around here, as an idea in your head. But anyway, with colleagues, I think Rachel's touched on some of it that I would have said as well, but you might want to use this animation to start talking with your colleagues about what you do know or what you don't know about Aboriginal culture, and what you include into your program, and why, what's that saying. You could also use it to prompt discussion about what identity is and how it's nurtured, and what was it that about Nana in particular that nurtured a strong sense of identity in her granddaughter. You might reflect on other Aboriginal identities that aren't represented in this film, as I think Lynn's mentioned at the start. Obviously, one story and depiction isn't going to be reflective of every Aboriginal family in Australia, so you might know more about your own local community and look at how identity it appears or shaped for those families. You might also just want to find out about, it might prompt you to think, we don't know anything about the traditional art in this area or the stories in this area, so that could be a starting point for you. I think to making things real and personal for yourself too, to look at how your own grandparents shaped your identity, and if you wanted to sort of really take that to a deeper level, to talk to each other about what impacts of disruption, disconnection with identity, think about what the impacts of that could be, and what if you didn't get to hear your own stories, as is the case for many Aboriginal people in Australia, due to lots of things, but obviously stolen generations. And even thinking about what if all reflections of your identity were either negative, as has been in the case in Australian educational settings before, or alternately completely absent. What if there was all reflections of your identity were completely absent? So during your formative years, how would that have impacted on your identity and your well-being? I think this animation is best used as a resource with educators, for professional development. But if you were to use it with non-Aboriginal children, of all the animations, I think it's the safest, most appropriate one to use. You could use this animation to talk to children about their own relationships with grandparents. You could discuss music and art as a form of communication, or you could just use it to illustrate Aboriginal perspectives of family and community. And that's my piece.
Great. Thanks very much, Jade. I know it's a real challenge to get through what we try, all the information we have and what we want to say. It's a real challenge. So thank you for pulling that together and giving us some different insights again. So I think we're getting a really rich overview of all the different ways to be thinking about these videos and thinking about the working with children in quite different ways. I can see that there's been some questions around working with knowing that there's Aboriginal families in the community, but not necessarily being able to reach them or not necessarily knowing where they are. And so I'm wondering if Jade or any of the other panellists have got some ideas about how you might reach or find out or make contact. What would be some ways for an early childhood service or a school perhaps to reach out and make contact with families that aren't sort of being identified, aren't known to the school as Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander families?
It's Jade, I don't know if you can hear me. I think it's really important that we, rather than think about going and seeking people out, think about looking at ourselves and how hard to reach are we, rather than looking at the hard to reach family idea. Reflecting back on your own service and going, what is it about this service that actually appears welcoming to an Aboriginal family? Yeah. What is it about our service that somebody would think I belong here in the first place? So there's a lot of self-reflection in that. And then I also think a process is to inform yourself in general, even starting with something as simple as going to your local government council. They probably have some information in regards to the land you're on as a very base starting point. Obviously, informing yourself through Aboriginal services specifically, going to Koori Heritage Trust, going to the Bunjalaka at the museum, getting some general information, and then you start kind of following a track, if you will. I mean, I've done it with my own family and areas of land that they've lived on, ended up sort of just reading more and more and finding out more about whose land that was. And I don't think there'll be a one-size-fits-all answer to how you discover that.
So looking at ourselves first and what are we doing that makes it easy for people to come and approach us is an important part, rather than thinking about what other people might do differently. Yeah. Carmen or Rachel, anything to add to that, or any other thoughts about that particular question?
Yeah, Lynn, it's Rachel. Look, where I work, we have a network where we work with all different services that work with children. So we meet regularly, probably twice a term. And I think, so it comes into the community side of KidsMatter. I think it's about knowing your community. So in our little network, because we meet regularly, we know what's happening in our community. And quite often I've had children referred to me and to the kinder through that community and through that network. So I think it really does go back to knowing your community quite well and going out there and really getting to know them. And I agree with Jade completely, making sure that your centre looks like it's a welcoming centre, that people want to come to your centre.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. That's great. Carmen, anything to add to that as well?
I'm actually just reminded of a conversation at one of the consultations at one time where a successful centre actually said, you've got to invite the community in. You've got to be part of the community. You can't see yourself as this separate entity that may have Aboriginal children or not. You've actually got to involve yourself in the rhythm of the community's activities, whether that be participating in NAIDOC or having a sorry day or inviting elders in or doing activities with the children where you might approach a member of the community to be involved in that theme for that week. So really kind of building relationships with community.
Yeah, great. Thank you. There's a few themes that keep coming through. Yes, who was that?
It's Jade. I just want to add one thing before I forget as a really important starting point. I don't know if the people out there would probably know about Reconciliation Australia and the RAPs they have, but they have a specific schools program called Narragunawali, which is for early childhood and schools, and it's a brilliant starting point anyway, and RA are incredibly supportive, so that's something I wanted to make sure I reminded people of.
Great. Okay, thank you. And hopefully we'll be able to put some links or some information about that for people to follow up as well. Another question that I think, Rachel, you had as well to ask people about the animations for children and using the animations to view and for children, working with children, and it came up a couple of times as well, I think, in your presentation as well, Jade. I guess just going back to our original planning around the videos and the purpose and who the audience is, when you're doing a project like this, you need to be really clear about who's the audience and what are the messages we want. And the audience we always had in mind were adults, and particularly thinking about for parents and Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander families, and then people who would work with those families to have conversations and build the relationship and use them as learning resources. What we found out, though, after the videos were first released, was that people were starting to use them with children and saying that they worked really well. So we started to get that feedback. So I guess I'm interested from the panel, any thoughts about that? And we have already touched on some of them might be more appropriate to use than others, but any other thoughts or suggestions people have got or other reflections? Carmel, have you got anything? Carmen, have you got anything that you might add to that?
For final reflection?
No, in terms of children viewing the videos or using the videos with children as an audience. Thinking about how children might respond to the videos, or any thoughts about that?
Not at the moment, not without going on.
Okay. Rachel?
Yeah, Lynn, I must admit, I used one of the animations, Thank You, with my children last year. It's a very simple animation. I'd recommend that people have a look at it. But it's about a little girl who goes along with her mother and visits all different people and, brings breakfast to one elderly person and goes to the next. And they all give her a little something. And at the end of the video, she sees a little boy falling over on his bike and she goes and gives him some of these things that she's received from other people because she knew that would make him feel better. And the only really dialogue in the video is the word thank you. And I used that with my children. The discussion that came out of that was fantastic. The real acknowledgement of, the poor child that had hurt himself and the baby that was crying and how could we help make the baby feel better. And in terms of social and emotional well-being, it was really interesting to hear their thoughts on it. And these are 4-year-olds, 5-year-olds. So I believe it's a good idea to show children, but I think you've got to pick your animation. I think you've got to have a purpose to it.
Yeah, I'd agree too with Rachel there. Using Nana's painting would be a good one to use with children, and I think most children like to speak about their own family experiences, and I think it would be a wonderful thing to just talk about, okay, this is what this child was experiencing with her Nana. What do you do with your Nana? And finding out, has your Nana told you about where she grew up? And so making those personal sort of links for a child in terms of what identity is about without making it an Aboriginal thing, on the side. Mm-hmm. It's that true sense of embedding a perspective.
Mm. Yep, great. Thank you. That's really useful, and it's fabulous to be thinking about the resources having many uses and being able to be used in lots of different ways, but always with caution, always with thinking behind it and as part of a process so well thought through, whether it's part of social emotional learning, whether it's part of building relationships, communication. So really having that mindset is really very important. There's lots and lots of different questions still coming through, and many things that we could be really talking about. One of the questions that we might just finish off with is a question that came through before tonight, but I thought it might be an important one, is how to best support students or families who are off-country. So I don't know if any of the panel would like to make a comment on that or any thoughts about that.
I think it's a really big issue to tackle. I think nobody can really understand the longing in your heart when you're away from country. I think having as many connections back to country as possible, and they're not going to be physical ones. They might be through art, just as Nana's painting. There might be through song. There might be through storytelling. And having this live participation in memories of country is, I suppose, going to help keep the connection going between heart and country for that little one.
Yeah, great. Okay, thank you, Carmen. We've running out of time very quickly, unfortunately. It feels like we could keep going for a really long time. We just are now at a point of a bit of a wrap-up, really. So some final reflections from the panel, anything that's been left unsaid, perhaps, or takeaway messages for people, or a reflection in terms of something that you might take away yourself. So who'd like to go first?
I will. I'll jump in.
Okay, thank you.
Again, because the audience I suppose I'm addressing really is the non-Aboriginal audience in non-Aboriginal services, etc. And the questions I get asked a lot is around, I'm afraid and how do I, find things out. And the most important thing, I think, is make sure you're listening to Aboriginal people themselves. Make sure you're listening to the stories that are authored by people themselves. And not sort of second hand. I can only tell you about my experience as much as anybody else can only tell you about theirs. So open your ears and close your mouth a bit more, and we'll learn more.
Yeah, great advice. Probably good advice everywhere, but I think that resonates with me and my experiences in doing this work and the consultations of spending time listening and doing a lot of that, and then checking back as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
I didn't impose my own assumptions or views onto the ideas as well. Thank you for that, Jade.
No worries.
Who'd like to go next?
I'll go. I still don't know what my final message would be. I think evolving project, and there's always the next step, which is wonderful. I think for people viewing their animations is to not view them just once. Keep going, keep viewing them. There's many, many layers, many intricacies, and many different ways in using the animations in your service. And just for yourself, as you learn more about Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander culture, going back and viewing them again and debriefing and talking with others about it, and then watching it again as you learn more, to really grow your own identity as being an Australian in Australia with the First Peoples.
Great, thank you, Carmen. Okay, that leaves you, Rachel.
Yes, thank you. Look, it's been lovely just looking at some of the general chat that people have put in here and some of the questions that have been asked, which are fantastic. I guess now, because we're running short of time, it's more about getting people to look at the resources that have been included, look at the KidsMatter website and the things that are included on that. And I know that they're adding more to the KidsMatter website as well in the next few weeks and months. So I guess that's really my final reflection. I know myself I'm going to go and have a look at some of the new stuff as it comes up, and I just feel we're learning and evolving more and more every time we look at some more information. So I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, thanks, Rachel. And I guess I'm seeing comments coming through that we need more time, and it's gone so quickly. And I think that's one of the things that happens in webinars often, but particularly when there's so much that people have been sharing, and just having a look through some of the comments has been really very interesting. And people, what I've really enjoyed looking at is people sharing information with each other and really giving each other suggestions and reflecting on some of their own what's resonated for them. But also coming up with ideas for each other. So I've really, really enjoyed watching that, and thank you very much for that level of participation, because I think it adds to the knowledge. It's like being in a virtual room, which we're in, and really I think adding to the work of this is bringing people's conversations together and people sharing their input with each other and adding to what the panel has been able to really been able to share with you tonight. I guess the sort of final messages for me is really reaffirming that the notion of understanding and relationships is a theme that keeps coming up, and how do we build those relationships? How do we look at ourselves and what it is that we bring to a situation? What is it that we bring to a relationship, and how do we look at our own self and our own identity? And I think Carmen talked about that really, really nicely. And how do we keep adding to our own understandings and appreciation of ourselves and of others, and really open to having different types of conversations or listening in some different ways. These resources are available for everybody, so they are the sorts of resources that people can tap into and share with each other and have many different kinds of conversations. And I'd love people to continue to share with each other the ways that they're using the resources. As I think Rachel said, keep looking at the website, keep in touch with KidsMatter through the various formats that are available for you. So you can certainly look at the website, and the web address there for the general KidsMatter website is there. If you haven't looked at the website before and you haven't really looked at how it works and the framework and the implementation and the resources that are available for people, I do encourage you to do that. And you can see there's also the separate page that does have all of these resources that have been developed as part of this particular project. And there are a range of different resources and more to come. So these are resources that have been there for a little while. There's a resource portal which does have a whole lot of information and papers and documents and reports and programs, projects that are available through that portal. There's programs that you can look at that might be relevant. There's a school section which does look at how to really use the KidsMatter framework and draw on a lot of things we've been talking about tonight in terms of how you might really make connections with Aboriginal people in the community using the framework, but doing it in a way that's particularly appropriate culturally. So there's an enormous amount of resources, and we do hope that people to engage with that and keep an eye on that and come in and out of it and dip in and out as you can. There's also a number of newsletters, e-newsletters that you can sign up for, so we would encourage you to do that as well, and they can be for families as well as health and community professionals and schools and early childhood services. And then we are with social media, so really tap into Facebook and Twitter. You might see some of us doing some of the Facebook sharing and tweeting, so really use that and share some of the ways that you're using these resources with other people and really get the word out there that they're being useful and how you are using them and how you're using the resources that sit around them to make sure that they are being used appropriately and as safely as possible to get the most from them. I would like to thank you for your participation tonight. As I keep saying, I've really enjoyed watching the interaction and really enjoyed the way that people have complemented the resources and really talking about the benefits they've got from the webinar. So thank you very much. And people who haven't participated before, hopefully this has been a good way for you to be introduced to the world of webinars. We do often have webinars, so look out for them as well. When you do sign out this evening, there is an exit survey that I did mention earlier on. So please spend a couple of extra minutes and complete the survey. It'll just come up when the screen finishes, when the screen closes, it will come up, and then certificates of attendance will be sent out in the next couple of weeks. And then you will be sent a link to the webinar and the online resources that we've been talking about. So we do encourage you to have a look at that, share that webinar with people who weren't able to participate tonight, share it with them, talk to them about the resources and check them out. Look out for the new resources that are going to be specifically targeting how to work with these resources. They'll be out in the next few weeks as well. So thank you again for participating tonight. Thank you very much to the panel again for your effort in planning for the webinar, for participating tonight and the thinking and the effort that's gone into that. Appreciate that very much. And the team here at APS and Redback for the behind-the-scenes work that goes on and that planning that enables the webinar to go across and happen so smoothly. So thank you very much for all of that support. And good evening.